Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with comics creator, artist Sean Forney. Sean, thank you for jumping in, joining, and bringing some lovely Spider-Man art over your shoulder there as
Yes.
well.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, that's my wall of Spider-Man stuff over there in the studio.
Love it, love it. Are these your pieces or are these pieces from other artists?
Pieces from other artists. I've got a little mix of stuff. There's a few original pieces hanging up, some prints, just a little mishmash, and then Spider-Man's like to my right side and to my left side is all Hulk stuff that I've acquired over the years.
Nice, nice. Now, folks out there will know you as an artist and particularly cover artist. You did a great variant for the first issue of Thundercats. You've
Thank
also,
you.
yeah, absolutely. You've worked on Lady Death, Fathom, The Boxmasters, Franklin and Ghost, Grimm Fairy Tales, and multiple other titles as well. So your work is definitely out there for people to check out.
Yes, yeah, it's been 2 decades of working on all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. How did you get on this path? How did you get started with comics and art?
I was a kid in the 80s that, saw all the crazy Saturday morning cartoons that we had.
Hmm, hmm.
Started out, I was big into He-Man. That was the big thing that grabbed my attention first. Um, and basically from listening to my parents that, as soon as I could hold a crayon or whatever, that was something that, kept me occupied with sitting there, coloring books, drawing, whatever. Um, and I want to say it was like kindergarten, maybe before kindergarten, something like that. My dad took me to the corner drugstore, and that was when I first discovered comic books. And instead of a spinner rack, it was like the big wall magazine rack type thing, and on the bottom shelf was various comic books. And I had been watching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on reruns on Saturday mornings or whatever, and I came across a Spider-Man comic, and I loved the
Hmm.
cartoon. It's like, oh, there's this new thing I haven't seen before. So I picked it up, took that home with me, read it inside and out. I've still got it. It's beat up from the years of being a kid and just reading it and going through it, trying to copy the drawings out of it, whatever. And that's really kind of what got me started into like falling in love with comic books and that kind of thing. And then several years later, when I was in like middle school, I was reading Wizard magazine. It was kind of at their like pinnacle at the time, and they were doing all sorts of interviews with like how to break into comics and all this stuff.
Hmm.
And in my mind, like, because I'd only ever seen stuff on like TV, so it was like, seeing Stan Lee do the intros for the cartoons and things like that. And it was seeing like, old guys, were all these people making comic books. That was the only thing I knew other than until reading that magazine and seeing Joe Madureira had an article in there like how he broke in, and it's like he was like 16 at the time when he broke in, and it's like, oh wow, he's only a few years older than me when he started doing this, and like I could do this, I could, this could be a job, that kind of thing, and that's just kind of what set me on that path and that goal of getting into all this.
Nice, nice. Well, along the way, any particular experiences, collaborations, projects that have stood out as being some of the most enjoyable or prominent?
Um, when I was like really starting to jump into this stuff, so it's like a few like I'll say like pivotal moments of getting into all this. Really early on, like I think it was like just before we did our first convention ever, back in like 2003 or so, 2004, somewhere in that ballpark. Um, my now wife and I had come up with the idea for our book Scarlet Huntress,
Hmm, hmm.
and so that was something that was like, we wanted a book to have on the table because I was just getting into this. And like our very first time setting up at a convention, it was literally, I had a portfolio of some stuff that I worked on. Uh, I had a tablecloth, and that was really about it to set up. I had no idea what I was getting into. Um, and it was literally, we had done the Scarlet Hunter story in an anthology, and the publisher of the anthology like showed up to the con with the box of books that was like comps or whatever the case was, or well, it was like I was buying some of them. So he had to have somebody escort him back to our table so I could pay him for the books so he could
Mhm.
actually pay his admission to get into the show. Yeah, that was like one of the big moments of like getting started and doing all this mess. And then I've been very fortunate to have some amazing folks that I've collaborated with, worked on over the last like 2 decades of doing this. I'd say one of the biggest like person in my corner once I started like really diving into this stuff. Like outside of my wife like being there and helping make all this stuff happen. My best friend, Josh Metters, when we met up like a few years after I got into doing this stuff professionally. Ended up we kind of lived in the same area in Ohio, became really close friends and all this stuff. And he really pushed me like as I was like trying to get more professional work, get into all this stuff. He kind of was one of the guys standing there like going, "Hey, your coloring looks great. Why don't you put together coloring samples and this kind of thing?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so he gave me a ton of work that he had worked on so I could, put together color sample stuff. And through him, like I got introduced to a lot of other individuals that he had worked with that hired me on to do different stuff. Like one in particular, one of the guys, again, I think one of the early people that like helped me get move forward in doing all this stuff was Tim Seeley.
Mhm.
He had me do a handful of things over the years. And through doing that, that kind of like pushed me in the position of a few years later. I met Murat Michaels at Comic Con, and he and I have been working together like 10 years now, doing all sorts of stuff outside of like everybody knows us for doing all the Do You Poo stuff and whatnot. But we've worked together on a number of his various books that he publishes, but also um, I've worked on a number of things that he's done that I colored for various covers for publishers and whatnot. Like we did a Zen, the Intergalactic Ninja miniseries a few years back. Um, so like again, somebody else that was like very pivotal in me getting bigger and better projects, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Um, and through him, that's how I ended up doing a lot of the Lady Death stuff. Because he's one of these guys. No matter who his friends are, who he's working with, whatever, he is always like pushing everybody to be bigger and better. And he'll shout from the rooftops of like, hey, these are guys to work with.
Nice.
And through that, that's like I said, that's how I ended up doing Lady Death stuff. That's how I met Brian Polito, also at Comic Con. And I've worked with him now the last probably 5 years, 6 years, something like that now, doing various stuff on all their different titles and their handcrafted things that they do through their Kickstarters and things like that. Um, so yeah, those are kind of like the big like standout people that I've worked with, standout moments, that kind of thing over doing all this stuff.
Nice, nice. I'm gonna point out the fact that you're wearing a Scarlet t-shirt there
Yes.
as well, which I love. And there's a really nice 6 degrees of separation here because I think it was Wizard magazine that introduced me to Brian Pulido and Lady Death. I remember
Yep.
grew up in a small town, and I remember Wizard being one of those places I could look for like what's new, what's different that might not
Yep.
be at the local Walden Books. So
Yeah.
some really nice threads there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anytime I like bring that up, there's so many folks. It's like, yeah, that's where I saw this stuff, or that's how I was introduced to this. And it's funny, the same thing. I was introduced through to Lady Death through seeing all the stuff in Wizard magazine. And back when I was so I think it was like my senior year of high school. I went to Chicago Comic Con, the Wizard Chicago Comic Con for the I think it was my second time going, and a buddy went with me. We were, like I said, I think it was like our senior year of high school. So it was like we were going, walking around the con, trying to figure out all this stuff, and ended up getting on an elevator with Brian. And
Nice,
that's
nice.
how I ended up meeting him the first time. I'm sure he has no idea who it was way back then, but it was just cool, like, meet him then and then flash forward like 20 some years and meet him at Comic Con. And it was kind of funny because he was running the booth and stuff, and I went up to go say hi and introduce myself. And before I got the opportunity, he introduced himself to me, like, "Hey, I'd love to work with you." And it was just one of the coolest experiences ever. It's like somebody that like I grew up seeing their stuff and all this is like wow, he actually knows who I am before I even get a chance to like introduce myself, any of this kind of stuff. So
Cool.
very, very cool experience.
Yeah. I'm curious as far as artistic process because you work on a range of things. Any particular steps, processes that you go through to kind of get inspiration and step into the creative world of, say, Thundercats versus Lady Death versus Grimm?
Um, usually like give me an example of like my like daily process. How I work is like I usually once I like sit down at the desk to start working, I will do some sort of warm-up sketch. And a lot of times it's kind of like something will spur an idea to do something to like start warming up. I'll see something on social media or something of that nature. And I'll do some like warm up sketches to get ready for the day, depending on what, if I know what I have going on for the day yet, or if it's kind of like one of those things where it's like waiting for, the email to pop up and be like, hey, I need, this thing ASAP or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, so if it comes to like doing like say the Thundercats cover that you mentioned, it's like that was something I'd been wanting to do for a long time, and the option became available. It's like, okay, I gotta jump on this. And I'm a big proponent of using Pinterest to save like all sorts of like, the artist morgue as it used to be called. That's where I've got tons of reference images of all sorts of stuff. Um, so I'll kind of like peruse something like that maybe to get some inspiration, get some ideas. And again, using that cover as an example, I think I roughed out like a dozen different ideas where I was sitting on my iPad just scribbling out, okay, I want Lionel like this. And then it's like, I want to do a
Mhm.
group shot. And so I did all these sketches, and then they were like, well, they're all approved. Just, you just got to pick one. I'm like, which one do I pick? And so I've picked the one that like I asked a bunch of friends like one through whatever. What do you guys like? Everybody landed on the same one. And I was like, all right,
Nice.
that's what I'm running with. And that's what ended up being the final piece of art that I did. And once I get the sketch figured out, I tighten up the sketch. I do a lot of my like rough sketches digitally so I can move stuff around and place stuff instead of trying to erase or light box or do any of that mess. Get my sketch figured out. I'll print it on actual 11 by 17 artboard. And then if I couldn't draw it tight enough digitally, I will go through and do pencils, come back in ink, and then finish off colors if it's something I'm doing start to finish that way. A lot of the other stuff like Lady Death, for example, most everything I've done that way has been coloring in some way, shape, or form. If it's something I'm doing digitally, I'll get sent the piece of art with a deadline, and then I try to figure out how do I approach it. Sometimes it's like I've got pretty open uh, way of I'm allowed to approach it, other than usually kind of one of the hard rules is it's got to be at night. It's got to
Mhm.
got to be something night related, unless I'm giving some sort of other direction beforehand. So then I try to figure out, okay, if I'm going to do it night, is, what color is the sky going to be? If I, say go with something blue, then I try to figure out everything from there of like what's going to be my like complementary colors, these kind of things. So that I know going into it, like here's kind of a palette that I'm going to stick with and make it work for that character. And that's kind of how I approach like most covers if I'm doing color work is like, I'm going to start with this. This is going to play off and give me like the various different atmospheric, rim lighting, things like that, and then dive into it. Um, and like some other instances, like when they've had me do like the homage stuff, it's like I'll be sent the cover that's an homage to like some say classic cover of whatever. Then it's like, okay, I've got to utilize that in such a way that it still plays into what we're doing with like Lady Death, or if it's like the Duty Poo stuff, which is like 99% homages. It's like, how can I still kind of put my own stamp on that, even
Mhm.
though I'm going and trying to recreate what somebody else has already done? It's like I want it to look close. I want it to have that feel, that vibe of, they used a particular style of maybe it might be airbrushy or, it's very painterly and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, what am I going to use that's going to kind of get that look? But then how do I put my own little spin on it in ways that's not going to like overpower what I need to be doing for that particular piece. Um, and that's kind of like my go-tos for like most everything that I work on. And if it's something like like I said, if I'm doing start to finish, I'll I'll generate a bunch of different ideas, and then I've got that struggle of like, okay, how do I narrow this down and then start working on it and get it done in a timely fashion?
Oh, yeah, very cool, very cool. And I just admire the artistic process. It's something that I want to get better at. So I'm always interested to hear about people's processes and uh, just the idea of having 12 different images for one cover and kind of going through that step by step, figuring out the direction to go. It's really cool to hear about sort of the rough draft of the process as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Any dream projects, any particular characters or worlds that you've not worked on that you would love to tackle?
Uh, I think I mentioned it early on. I'm a big Spider-Man nut,
Yep, yep.
obviously with the wall there. So I'd love to do something in that realm. I again, I my first like pop culture love, if you will, was He-Man. So if I could like dive into something like that, and I'm still putting it out in the universe, and I'll cross my fingers, whatever I need to do. They're doing a crossover with Masters of the Universe and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Nice.
That would be like just killer if I could get on doing something with that. I tried to find somebody that wanted to do like a retailer incentive cover or something. So put that out in the world if anybody's interested. I'm totally down for doing something like that. And
Absolutely.
anything that I grew up on, like Masters Universe, Thundercats, Ninja Turtles, GI Joe, Transformers, any of that stuff. I would love to just dive into it and get to play around that sandbox. It would, just get a kick out of it on top of, just the general idea of being able to work on it. It would be just a ton of fun to just put my own kind of stamp on there of like, hey, I did this.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I am also all in for those worlds, so would love to see your approach to those as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any particular works that are new or upcoming that you can talk about that people can be on the lookout for?
So we just did San Diego Comic Con.
Hmm.
Been home for basically like a little over a week now from that. So what we did is we did a new issue of our book Scarlet Huntress, and we're starting with volume 2, issue 1. We're gonna do a new short mini series, if you will. Hopefully shooting for like 4 to 5 issues. Um, each book is Scarlet is gonna come across a different cryptid. So the first one is Scarlet Huntress meets Mothman.
Nice, nice.
So we did 16 pages for it currently. That was what we released at Comic Con. We did an exclusive. We did 25 trade dress covers and 25 virgin covers. They went over extremely well. So I was just beyond ecstatic that basically before the con was out, we had sold all but like 3 of them. We came home with 3, and then they sold out quickly after we got home. Um, so the plan is we're going to do another exclusive for New York Comic Con in the fall. Be a different cover, but same interiors, obviously. Um, but after we do those 2 exclusives and get that out in the world, kind of hopefully build up a little bit of hype. Our plan is to add on to that 16 pages and go for at least a 24, maybe a little bit larger page count, um, and do a Kickstarter for Scarlet Huntress meets Mothman, and then hopefully over the course of the next couple of years, because I usually only get about a book done per year when in between working on everything else. Um, is each issue will be a different cryptid creature that Scarlet will meet. So it'll, that issue will focus on her running into like say Bigfoot. Where we'll throw in our little mix of like kind of like I like to compare it to like X-Files, how they used to do like that creature of the week type thing.
Hmm.
It's like there'll
Hmm.
be the main overarching story of Scarlet going on this quest. But then you'll meet a different cryptid. But then there'll be some other stuff that'll kind of be going on. Like I'm kind of drawing some inspiration from like the classic comics, and also the idea of like the best example I can give is like The Simpsons. When you watch the
Hmm.
episode of Simpsons, the first like 5 minutes of it usually has nothing to do with the rest of the story.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, I want to dive in. You're in the middle of the story. Scarlett's doing something, and she's like wrapping it up in like the first 2 pages. And then the rest of the story is, the new cryptid. So those first couple pages might be her finding like a new werewolf coven or something like that, or might be coming across a different cryptid. but then you're gonna have that the rest of that story of, like Bigfoot or, Chupacabra, whatever it is, the rest of the
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
So it'll be like kind of like a minor little thing going on just to introduce something, and then we get this overall story where she's traveling around the country meeting these different creatures. And then I'm gonna put a little spin on it. You'll see some stuff from a different perspective throughout the story as well. So it's a little kind of
Nice,
three things going on at once, basically.
nice, nice. If I'm a listener out there and I want to find out more, I know you have a website, particular spaces online or in person as far as conventions where I could connect.
Um, my website is seanforney.com. So it's SeanForney.com. All my social media is at Sean Forney Art, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Try to get that same name on every account. Right now, the only definite convention I've got planned for the rest of 2024 is New York Comic Con. We'll be in Artist Alley. Don't know a table number or anything that mess yet. And potentially GalaxyCon Columbus here in Columbus, Ohio area. That I'm still waiting for a final confirmation, but that is tentatively planned. And then 2025, we're waiting. Already started applying for shows for next year. So I will post that up on social media, the website, newsletter, all those, fun places to go find that stuff. And then hopefully everybody can kind of keep track of where we're at. And there's also on our website links to the stores so you can pick up the books, artwork, all that mess.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Anything in the talk through that we've missed that you want to make sure to mention before we close out?
Uh, I'm sure there probably is, but it's not coming to mind. As like I know I've got some other stuff coming out project wise that hasn't like fully been announced, but
Hmm.
I do know I'll say that because we did put out a little bit of it because this next year will be the 10th anniversary. We do have something in the works for Do You Poo for the 10th anniversary. Once I have more details and I'm fully allowed to announce everything, I will put that on all the social medias and all that stuff too.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Sean, I greatly appreciate the time. I appreciate the work and glad to have you back anytime to talk Scarlet or other projects as they come along.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to invite me on here and get you chat a little bit. And yeah, I'd love to join you once I know I've got some more stuff I can chat about. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, sounds great. We will plan on it. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you.